When the dust settled on the gambling table at the Silver Dollar Saloon in Pinon, Arizona Territory, Zara Elliott's life changed forever. The year was 1882, and her brother Thomas had just wagered the only thing of value he had left her. Zara stood trembling in the corner of the smoke-filled saloon, her knuckles white as she gripped the worn fabric of her skirt. She was 22 years old, educated enough to teach in the local schoolhouse, but not worldly enough to understand how her own flesh and blood could reduce her to property. Thomas had lost everything, first their parents' ranch, then their savings, and now his final desperate bet had cost Zara her freedom. "Straight flush," declared the stranger across from Thomas, his voice even and controlled as he revealed his winning hand. "I believe that settles our business." The stranger was tall and broad-shouldered, with a quiet intensity that made the other men at the table shift uncomfortably. Zara had heard whispers about him since he rode into town 3 days ago. They called him Hayes Maddox, a cattle driver turned ranch owner from the northern part of the territory. Some said he was dangerous, others claimed he was just lucky. Tonight he had been both. Thomas stumbled to his feet, sweat beading on his forehead. "Now listen here, Maddox. I was just bluffing about my sister. You can't honestly expect. I expect a man to honor his debts," Hayes interrupted, his green eyes finally turning toward Zara. Their gazes locked across the room, and something unreadable passed across his weathered face. "Unless you've got something else of value hidden away," Thomas's face flushed crimson. "I've got nothing. You've taken it all. Then our agreement stands." Hayes rose from the table, collecting his winnings and tucking them into his vest pocket. He tipped his hat to the saloon owner and made his way toward Zara, his spurs jingling softly against the wooden floor. "Miss Elliott," he said, his voice lower now that he stood before her, "I believe we have some matters to discuss." Zara lifted her chin, refusing to show fear despite the terror churning in her stomach. "I am not cattle to be traded, Mr. Maddox." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "No, madam, you certainly are not, but your brother seems to think otherwise." He gestured toward the door. "Shall we speak somewhere more private? I promise no harm will come to you." Thomas lurched forward, grabbing Hayes's arm. "Wait, I just need one more chance. One more game." Hayes removed Thomas's hand with a swift, practiced motion. "You've had enough chances. Your sister deserves better than to watch you gamble away what little dignity you have left." The saloon had gone quiet, all eyes watching the drama unfold. Zara felt the weight of those stares like physical pressure on her skin. With no real choice before her, she nodded curtly and followed Hayes outside into the cool desert night. "I won't go with you," she said as soon as they were alone on the wooden sidewalk that lined Pinon's Main Street. "Whatever my brother promised, I am my own person." Hayes Maddox studied her for a long moment, his expression inscrutable beneath the brim of his hat. "Miss Elliott, I have no intention of forcing you anywhere. The truth is, I knew your brother was desperate enough to bet something he had no right to wager." Zara blinked in confusion. "Then why accept the bet?" "Because men like Thomas Elliott don't learn their lesson until they've lost everything, and because I couldn't stand by and watch him drag you down with him anymore." Hayes removed his hat, revealing dark hair with touches of silver at the temples. He was older than she'd first thought, perhaps 35, with lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of years under the harsh western sun. "How do you know anything about me or my brother?" Zara demanded. "I've been in Pinon for 3 days. That's long enough to hear how Thomas Elliott gambled away his family's legacy and has been living off his sister's teaching salary while promising to turn things around." Hayes's voice hardened. "Long enough to see him drag you into that saloon tonight, looking desperate enough to do something foolish." Zara felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. "So you appointed yourself my savior. I don't need your charity, Mr. Maddox." "It's not charity I'm offering," he said. "It's a proposition. I own the Crossfire Ranch about 20 miles north of here. I need a housekeeper and cook. The pay is fair, the work honest, and you'd have your own quarters. Most importantly, you'd be away from your brother's debts and the men who might come looking to collect them in other ways." Zara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was. Thomas had gambled away their home months ago. They'd been staying in a rented room at the boarding house, paid for by her small teacher's salary. But the school term had ended, and with it her income until fall. Thomas had promised to find work to make things right, but tonight had proven those promises empty. "Why would you help me?" she asked suspiciously. Hayes replaced his hat, adjusting it with practiced ease. "Let's just say I've seen what happens to good people caught in bad situations. You deserve a chance to make your own way without your brother's shadow hanging over you." Before Zara could respond, the saloon doors burst open and Thomas stumbled out, his face contorted with rage. "You can't take my sister," he shouted, drawing the attention of passers-by. Hayes turned slowly, positioning himself slightly in front of Zara. "Your sister is free to make her own choices, something you should have considered before using her as collateral." Thomas pulled a knife from his boot, the blade catching the moonlight. "I won't let you take her." Hayes didn't flinch. "Put that away before you hurt yourself, Elliott. You're drunk and making a scene." "Thomas, stop this," Zara pleaded, stepping around Hayes. "You've done enough damage tonight." "I was trying to win back the ranch," Thomas slurred, the knife wavering in his unsteady hand. "I was so close, just needed one more good hand." "The ranch has been gone for months," Zara said, her voice breaking. "And now you've tried to gamble me away too. How could you?" Thomas's face crumpled. "I didn't mean it. I didn't think I'd lose." "That's your problem, Elliott," Hayes said quietly. "You never think you'll lose until you already have." The sheriff appeared then, drawn by the commotion. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his hand resting on his holstered gun. "Just a disagreement over a card game, Sheriff," Hayes replied calmly. "Mr. Elliott is having trouble accepting the outcome." The sheriff looked from Hayes to Thomas, then to the knife still in Thomas's hand. "Put that away, Elliott, unless you want to spend the night in my jail." Thomas hesitated before reluctantly sheathing the knife. "This isn't over, Maddox," he muttered. "Yes, it is," Zara said firmly, surprising herself with her resolve. She turned to Hayes. "Mr. Maddox, I accept your offer of employment. When do we leave?" Hayes's eyes widened slightly, the only indication of his surprise. "I'll be heading back to Crossfire at first light, if you can be ready by then." "Zara, you can't be serious," Thomas protested, reaching for her arm. Zara stepped back, avoiding his touch. "I have nothing left here, Thomas." "You've seen to that." The sheriff, sensing the tension, stepped between the siblings. "Elliott, I think you'd better come with me. Sleep off that whiskey in a cell where you can't cause any more trouble tonight." As the sheriff led a protesting Thomas away, Zara felt an odd sense of relief mixed with trepidation. She was about to leave the only home she'd ever known with a man she barely knew. Yet somehow, it seemed safer than staying. "Miss Elliott," Hayes said softly, "if you have second thoughts by morning, I'll understand. This is your choice to make, not mine or your brother's." Zara met his gaze directly. "I'll be ready at dawn, Mr. Maddox, and I expect to earn my keep through honest work, nothing more." Hayes nodded, his expression solemn. "You have my word." As they parted ways, Zara heading to the boarding house to pack her meager belongings, she wondered what kind of life awaited her at the Crossfire Ranch. She had escaped one form of bondage only to willingly enter another. Yet something about Hayes Maddox's steady gaze gave her hope that, perhaps this time, her fate would be in her own hands. The dawn broke over Pinyon with streaks of pink and gold that belied Zara's troubled night. She had packed her few possessions, 2 dresses, undergarments, a cherished book of poetry her mother had given her, and a small photograph of her parents taken before their deaths 3 years prior. Thomas had not returned to their rented room, presumably still in the sheriff's custody. Zara left a brief note for her brother, explaining her decision without apology. Their relationship had deteriorated so gradually that she hardly recognized when Thomas had transformed from the protective older brother of her childhood to the desperate gambler who would wager her future without hesitation. Hayes Maddox waited by the livery stable, 2 horses saddled and ready. He wore the same clothes as the previous night, though he looked remarkably composed for a man who had spent the evening gambling. His horse, a magnificent chestnut gelding, stood patiently beside a smaller bay mare. "The mare's name is Penny," Hayes said by way of greeting. "She's gentle but sure-footed. Can you ride?" "Yes," Zara replied, grateful for small mercies. Growing up on a ranch had ensured she was comfortable on horseback. "My father made sure of it." Hayes nodded, taking her small carpetbag and securing it to Penny's saddle. "It's about 4 hours' ride to Crossfire. We'll stop midway to rest the horses." The town was just beginning to stir as they rode out, the shopkeepers opening their doors and the smell of fresh bread wafting from the bakery. Zara felt eyes following them, knew that by noon the gossip would be spreading. Zara Elliott had left with the stranger who won her in a card game. The thought made her cheeks burn with humiliation. As if reading her mind, Hayes spoke when they reached the outskirts of town. "People will talk, but talk fades. What matters is what you do next." They rode in companionable silence for the first hour, the desert landscape opening up around them. Saguaro cacti stood like sentinels against the brightening sky, and in the distance, the mountains rose purple and imposing. Despite her apprehension, Zara found herself appreciating the beauty of the Arizona territory. "Have you always lived in Pinyon?" Hayes asked, breaking the silence. "Yes, my father established our ranch there before I was born. My mother was a schoolteacher from back east." Zara adjusted her bonnet against the strengthening sun. "And you, Mr. Maddox, where are you from originally?" "Texas," he replied. "Left when I was 17 to drive cattle, been moving around the territory since then." "Until you settled at Crossfire," a shadow passed over his face. "Yes." "Bought it 3 years ago." Zara sensed there was more to the story but didn't press. They were still strangers, after all, despite the unusual circumstances that had brought them together. "Tell me about the ranch," she said instead. "Who else works there?" "My foreman, Luis Vasquez, has been with me since I bought the place. There are 4 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse: Miguel, Jack, Charlie, and Caleb. During roundup and branding, we hire more men temporarily." Hayes guided his horse around a cluster of rocks. "The main house has been empty except for me. Mrs. Alvarez from the neighboring ranch comes by twice a week to cook and clean, but she's getting older and can't manage it anymore." Zara contemplated this information. 6 men on the ranch, and she would be the only woman in residence. Her mother would be scandalized at the impropriety, yet Zara found herself more concerned with practical matters. "What exactly will my duties entail?" she asked. "Cooking for the men, keeping the main house in order, managing the household supplies." "I'll have one of the hands help with the heavy work, chopping wood, hauling water." Hayes glanced at her. "Your quarters will be separate from mine. You'll have privacy and respect. And if things don't work out, if I wish to leave," Hayes didn't hesitate, "then I'll ensure you reach your destination safely, with wages for the time you've worked." "This isn't imprisonment, Miss Elliott. You're free to go whenever you choose." Zara relaxed slightly at his reassurance. "Thank you for being forthright." They stopped to rest the horses near a small spring around midday. Hayes produced jerky and hardtack from his saddlebags, along with a canteen of water that he offered to Zara first. "It's not much of a meal," he apologized. "The cooking at Crossfire has been basic since Mrs. Alvarez cut back her hours." "I'm a decent cook," Zara said, accepting the simple fare gratefully. "My mother taught me, though I've had little opportunity to practice recently." Thomas preferred to eat at the saloon. A flash of something anger perhaps crossed Hayes's features at the mention of her brother. "How long has he been gambling?" Zara sighed, breaking a piece of hardtack. "It started after our parents died. A fever took them both within days of each other." Thomas was always restless, eager for adventure rather than the steady work of ranching. With our parents gone, there was nothing to stop him from visiting the saloons. At first, it seemed harmless, a game or two after selling cattle. Then he started staying out all night, coming home with stories of big wins or excuses for losses. "And the ranch, he mortgaged it without telling me. I only found out when the bank came to collect." Zara's voice grew bitter at the memory. "He swore he could win it back with one good hand. Instead, he lost what little money we had left." Hayes was silent for a moment, contemplating the horizon. Some men can't stop once they start down that road. The promise of easy money becomes like a sickness. "You seemed quite comfortable at the gambling table yourself," Zara observed, unable to keep the accusation from her voice. Hayes met her gaze directly. "I know my limits. I don't play to chase losses or dreams. It's a calculated risk, not a desperate hope." "Is that why you were in Pinyon?" "To gamble?" "No." He stood, brushing dust from his trousers. "I had business with the bank regarding cattle loans. The card game was an opportunity that presented itself." Zara stood as well, suddenly aware of how alone they were in the vast desert landscape. "An opportunity to acquire a housekeeper." Hayes's expression softened. "An opportunity to help someone who deserved better than being wagered in a card game." Before Zara could respond, Hayes was already moving to prepare the horses for the remainder of their journey. They rode through the heat of the afternoon, the landscape gradually changing as they headed north. The flat desert gave way to rolling hills dotted with juniper and pinyon pines that gave Pinyon its name. It was mid-afternoon when Hayes pointed to a distant cluster of buildings nestled in a valley between two gentle slopes. "Crossfire Ranch," he announced, a note of pride in his voice. "Named for the creek that crosses the north pasture." As they drew closer, Zara could see that the main house was a substantial two-story structure built of adobe and timber, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. A bunkhouse, barn, and several smaller outbuildings completed the ranch proper, while corrals and pastures stretched beyond. Cattle grazed in the distance, black dots against the golden grass. "It's larger than I expected," Zara admitted, impressed despite herself. "Started small, but we've grown each year, now run about 500 head of cattle." Hayes rode toward the main house, where a man emerged onto the porch at their approach. Luis Vasquez was a weathered Mexican man in his 40s, with a neat mustache and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. He greeted Hayes with a nod before his gaze shifted curiously to Zara. "Luis, this is Miss Zara Elliott. She'll be taking over as housekeeper." Hayes dismounted, then moved to help Zara down, his hands strong and sure at her waist. "Welcome to Crossfire, Miss Elliott," Luis said, his accent softening his words. "We have been in need of a woman's touch around here." Two younger ranch hands appeared from the direction of the barn, eyeing Zara with undisguised curiosity. Hayes made quick introductions: Miguel, Lewis's nephew, and Jack, a freckle-faced cowboy barely older than Zara herself. Charlie and Caleb are out checking the north pasture, Hayes explained. You'll meet them at supper. He turned to Lewis. Is the back bedroom ready? She, patron. Mrs. Alvarez aired it out yesterday when you sent word you were returning. Hayes nodded his approval. Jack, take Miss Elliott's bag to her room. Miguel, see to the horses. Zara followed Hayes into the house, momentarily overwhelmed by the sudden flurry of activity after the quiet hours on the trail. The main floor of the ranch house was spacious, with a large central room that served as both parlor and dining area. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, while practical but well-crafted furniture filled the space. The kitchen is through there. Hayes indicated a doorway. Pantry and cold storage beyond that. Upstairs are 4 bedrooms mine, 2 guest rooms, and my office. Your room is down that hallway, past the kitchen. It has its own entrance to the yard and washroom attached. It was built for the housekeeper when the original owner had a family here. Zara nodded, trying to memorize the layout. When would you like me to begin my duties? Rest today. Get settled. Tomorrow is soon enough to start. Hayes removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair. Supper is usually at 6, simple fare whatever the men manage to cook up. I could prepare supper tonight, Zara offered, suddenly eager to prove her worth. Hayes studied her for a moment. If you're certain you're not too tired from the journey, I'd prefer to be useful. Zara straightened her shoulders. And I'd like to assess the pantry and make a list of supplies needed. A hint of a smile touched Hayes's mouth. Very well. I'll leave you to it then. Lewis can show you where everything is kept. After Hayes departed to attend to ranch business, Zara explored her new quarters. The bedroom was simple but comfortable, with a single bed, dresser, washstand, and small writing desk. A colorful woven rug softened the wooden floor, and curtains of faded blue cotton hung at the window that overlooked a small kitchen garden. Jack delivered her carpetbag, tipping his hat awkwardly before retreating. Zara unpacked her few belongings, smoothing her dresses into the dresser drawers and placing her parents' photograph on the bedside table. When she had finished, she washed her face and hands, pinned up her hair more securely, and ventured to the kitchen to begin her new role. Lewis proved to be a patient guide, showing her the pantry stores and explaining the ranch's rhythms. The men eat breakfast before dawn, he told her. Dinner at midday is sometimes in the field during busy seasons. Supper is when everyone gathers. The pantry was well stocked with basics: flour, sugar, beans, rice, coffee, and preserves, but Zara noted a lack of fresh vegetables beyond onions and potatoes. Is there a kitchen garden? She asked. She, behind the house, but it needs tending. Mrs. Alvarez has not had time. Zara made mental notes for tomorrow's tasks as she assessed what she could prepare for supper. She settled on a hearty beef stew with the last of the potatoes and onions, cornbread baked in the cast iron skillet, and stewed apples with cinnamon for dessert. As she worked in the kitchen, she found herself gradually relaxing. The familiar tasks centered her, giving her purpose after months of uncertainty in Pinyon. Lewis came and went, answering her questions and occasionally offering assistance, while the ranch hands peered in curiously when passing the kitchen window, drawn by the unfamiliar and appetizing aromas. By 6 o'clock, the table was set, and the food ready. Zara heard the men washing up on the back porch, their voices a low murmur punctuated by occasional laughter. She smoothed her apron nervously, suddenly aware that this meal would be her first impression on the entire ranch. Hayes entered first, followed by Lewis and 4 ranch hands. Charlie and Caleb had returned from the north pasture, both eyeing Zara with surprise and appreciation. The men seated themselves around the large oak table, waiting for Hayes to take his place at the head before reaching for the food. "Miss Elliott has prepared supper for us," Hayes announced unnecessarily, his eyes taking in the spread with evident approval. A welcome change from Jack's beans and bacon. "Hey now," Jack protested good-naturedly. "My beans are famous." "Infamous, maybe," Charlie retorted, earning laughter from the others. Zara remained standing uncertainly until Hayes gestured to the empty chair at the other end of the table. "Please join us, Miss Elliott." The meal passed pleasantly, with the men initially on their best behavior before gradually relaxing into their usual banter. Zara observed the dynamics with interest. Hayes was clearly respected, his quiet authority unquestioned, while Lewis served as a bridge between boss and hands. The men themselves were a diverse group, from Miguel's youthful energy to Caleb's weathered experience. "This is the best meal I've had since leaving my mother's house," Charlie declared, helping himself to more stew. "Miss Elliott, you're a godsend." Zara felt herself blushing at the praise. "Thank you. It's simple fare, but I'm glad you're enjoying it." "Simple but well prepared," Hayes commented, his eyes meeting hers briefly. "A rare combination." After the meal, the men helped clear the table without being asked, a gesture Zara appreciated. As the ranch hands drifted outside to enjoy the cooling evening air with pipes and conversation, Hayes remained, pouring coffee for himself and Zara. "You've made a favorable impression," he said, passing her a steaming cup. "I haven't seen the men volunteer for kitchen duty since I've owned this place." Zara accepted the coffee with a small smile. "Food is a powerful motivator." "Indeed." Hayes settled back in his chair, studying her over the rim of his cup. "How are you finding Crossfire so far?" "It seems well run," Zara answered honestly. "The men respect you, and there's an order to things that's reassuring." Hayes nodded, seemingly pleased with her assessment. "It's taken time to build this place into something worthwhile. When I bought it, the previous owner had let everything go to ruin. We've worked hard to make it profitable again." "Why this ranch?" Zara asked, curious about what had drawn him to this particular piece of Arizona. A shadow crossed Hayes's face, much like it had earlier that day. "It reminded me of somewhere I used to know," he said simply, then changed the subject. "Do you have everything you need for your quarters? Is there anything missing that would make you more comfortable?" Zara recognized the deflection but didn't press. "The room is perfectly adequate, thank you. I would like to revive the kitchen garden when time permits. Fresh vegetables would be welcome, I imagine." "Of course. Miguel can help with the heavy digging. His mother maintains an excellent garden at Lewis's home." Hayes finished his coffee and stood. "I have accounts to review before turning in. If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask. Good night, Miss Elliott." "Good night, Mr. Maddox." After Hayes departed, Zara finished washing the dishes and tidying the kitchen, finding comfort in the routine tasks. Through the window, she could see the ranch hands sitting outside the bunkhouse, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. The sun was setting behind the western hills, painting the sky in spectacular shades of orange and purple. As Zara prepared for bed in her new room, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in just 24 hours. Yesterday, she had been at the mercy of her brother's reckless decisions. Tonight, she was establishing herself in a new home, with work that gave her purpose and the promise of independence. Yet as she drifted toward sleep, Zara couldn't help wondering about the man who had orchestrated this change in her circumstances. Hayes Maddox remained an enigma, a gambler with principles, a rancher with secrets. Despite his assurances, She still didn't fully understand why he had intervened in her fate. Perhaps, Zara thought as sleep claimed her, that was a mystery for another day. Days at Crossfire Ranch quickly settled into a rhythm that Zara found both demanding and satisfying. She rose before dawn to prepare breakfast for the hands' hearty fare of biscuits, gravy, eggs, and coffee that would sustain them through the morning's work. After the men departed for their duties, she turned her attention to the house, cleaning and organizing rooms that had clearly lacked a woman's touch for some time. Hayes was often gone before breakfast, riding out to check on cattle or confer with Lewis about the day's tasks. He returned for the midday meal when possible, but frequently ate in the field with the hands. Supper was the one time when everyone gathered, sharing the day's events over Zara's increasingly appreciated cooking. By the end of her first week, Zara had transformed the main house. Floors gleamed, windows sparkled, and the musty odor that had permeated some of the less used rooms had been replaced by the fresh scent of lemon oil and lavender. She had also begun work on the kitchen garden with Miguel's help, clearing weeds and preparing the soil for planting. It was during her second week at Crossfire that Zara discovered the library. She had assumed the closed door at the end of the upstairs hallway was another bedroom, but when she opened it while dusting, she found walls lined with bookshelves. Hundreds of volumes filled the space, from practical manuals on animal husbandry and agriculture to classical literature and poetry. "It was my wife's room," came Hayes's voice from behind her, making Zara start in surprise. She turned to find him standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude. I was just cleaning and it's all right," Hayes said, stepping into the room. "Caroline loved books, collected them wherever we traveled." He ran his fingers along the spine of a leather-bound volume. "I've kept it as she left it." Zara absorbed this new information with quiet surprise. Hayes had never mentioned a wife, and there were no photographs or feminine touches in the main house that might have suggested her presence. "I didn't realize you were married," she said carefully. "Was," Hayes corrected, his voice flat. "Caroline died 3 years ago. That's when I bought Crossfire." "I'm sorry for your loss," Zara offered, understanding now the shadow that occasionally crossed his face. Hayes nodded in acknowledgement. "You're welcome to use the library. The books shouldn't sit gathering dust when someone could be enjoying them." "Thank you," Zara said sincerely. "I've missed reading. My brother sold most of our books to pay his debts." Something hardened in Hayes's jaw at the mention of Thomas, but he merely nodded again before changing the subject. "The garden looks to be coming along well." "Yes, Miguel has been a tremendous help. We should have radishes and lettuce within a few weeks, and tomatoes by high summer." Zara hesitated before adding, "I made a list of seeds and supplies needed for the kitchen. Would it be possible to order them from town? Of course. Lewis is riding to Pinyon tomorrow for supplies. Give him your list and he'll see to it." Hayes moved toward the door. "I'm glad you're settling in, Miss Elliott, Mr. Maddox," Zara called as he was about to leave. "May I ask you something?" He paused, turning back to face her. "Yes. Have you heard anything of my brother?" Hayes's expression softened slightly. "Lewis brought news from town last week. Your brother was released from jail the morning after we left. Last anyone saw, he was heading toward Tucson on the stage." Zara nodded, unsurprised yet still disappointed. Thomas had run rather than face the consequences of his actions or make amends with his sister. It was typical of him, yet it still hurt. "Thank you for telling me," she said quietly. Hayes studied her for a moment. "Family can be our greatest strength or our deepest wound, sometimes both at once." With that cryptic observation, he left her alone in the library. Zara moved slowly among the shelves, running her fingers along the spines much as Hayes had done. She selected a volume of Tennyson's poetry and carried it back to her room, a small treasure to savor in her evening hours. As May turned to June, the Arizona heat intensified and the work of the ranch grew more demanding. The first cattle drive of the season was approaching, and Hayes spent long days with the hands preparing the herd. Zara found herself rising even earlier to ensure the men had substantial meals before their grueling work, and staying up late to mend torn clothing or prepare provisions for the next day. The garden flourished under her care, providing fresh vegetables that the ranch hands praised with genuine enthusiasm. Zara had also discovered a neglected apple orchard behind the barn, which Lewis confirmed had once produced excellent fruit before being abandoned. The Senora Mrs. Maddox, she had plans for those trees, Lewis told Zara one evening as they walked back from inspecting the orchard. She talked of making cider and preserves to sell in town. What was she like? Zara asked, curious about the woman whose books she now read and whose house she now maintained. Lewis considered the question carefully. Beautiful, yes, but more than that, determined. She came from back east, a doctor's daughter. She had ideas for the ranch, for making it something special. He shook his head sadly. The patron was different then. He smiled more. Zara thought of Hayes's reserved demeanor, the way he kept himself slightly apart even when surrounded by his men. How did she die? She asked softly. Childbirth, Lewis replied, his voice lowering respectfully. The baby, too. The doctor from town could not reach them in time. The knowledge settled heavily in Zara's heart. It explained so much about Hayes, his solitary nature, the shadows in his eyes, the untouched library. He had lost not only his wife but the future they had planned together. That evening at supper, Zara found herself watching Hayes with new understanding. He ate quietly while the hands discussed the upcoming cattle drive, occasionally offering guidance or settling minor disagreements about the route. When he caught her looking, Zara didn't glance away as she might have before. Instead, she offered a small smile which he returned after a moment's hesitation. Later, as Zara was finishing the dishes, Hayes appeared in the kitchen doorway. I hear you discovered the orchard, he said. Yes, Zara replied, drying her hands on her apron. It needs pruning and care, but the trees seem healthy underneath the neglect. Caroline planted most of those trees herself. Hayes leaned against the doorframe. She had visions of making Crossfire known for its apples as well as its cattle. It could still happen, Zara suggested gently. The trees just need attention. Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Perhaps. I've been meaning to ask, are you comfortable here? Is there anything you need that we haven't provided? The question seemed to carry more weight than its simple words suggested. Zara considered her answer carefully. I'm very comfortable, Mr. Maddox. The work is satisfying and everyone has been kind. She paused before adding, I do miss teaching, though. I enjoyed working with the children in Pinyon. There aren't many children nearby, Hayes acknowledged. The closest school is in Silver Creek, about 10 miles east. It's not a complaint, Zara assured him. Just an observation. Hayes nodded thoughtfully. The cattle drive leaves the day after tomorrow. I'll be gone with the men for about 2 weeks. Lewis will remain here to look after things along with Miguel. I'll make sure everything runs smoothly in your absence, Zara promised. I have no doubt. Hayes straightened, preparing to leave. Good night, Miss Elliott. Good night, Mr. Maddox. 2 days later, Zara rose long before dawn to prepare a substantial breakfast for the men departing on the cattle drive. She had spent the previous day baking journey bread and packing provisions that would supplement what the chuck wagon carried. The kitchen was warm from the stove's heat as she worked by lamplight, mixing biscuit dough and slicing bacon. The men arrived as the first gray light of dawn appeared, their voices subdued in the early hour. They ate heartily, complimenting Zara on the meal and thanking her for the packed provisions. Hayes was the last to enter, already dressed in his trail clothes, his gun belt slung low on his hips. "Everything's ready," he told Lewis as he accepted the coffee Zara handed him. "You know what needs doing while we're gone." "She, patron. Miguel and I will manage." Hayes turned to Zara. "Mrs. Alvarez will come by twice a week as usual. If you need anything else, Lewis will see to it." "We'll be fine," Zara assured him. "Safe travels, Mr. Maddox." Hayes held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary. "Take care of yourself, Miss Elliott." As the men filed out to mount up, Zara followed them onto the porch. The eastern sky was lightening, transforming from gray to pale pink and gold. The cattle herd could be heard in the distance, lowing softly as the hands prepared them for the long journey to the railhead in Hallbrook. Hayes swung into the saddle with practiced ease, adjusting his hat against the coming sun. He looked back at the ranch house where Zara stood on the porch, raised his hand in a brief salute, then turned his horse toward the waiting herd. Zara watched until the dust cloud raised by hundreds of hooves obscured her view, feeling an unexpected hollowness at his departure. The days that followed were quieter than Zara had anticipated. With only Lewis and Miguel remaining, the meals were smaller and the house seemed emptier. She filled her time with deep cleaning projects she hadn't had time for before, venturing into rarely used rooms and closets to bring order to long neglected spaces. It was during one such project, cleaning the storage room off the kitchen, that Zara discovered a trunk tucked beneath shelves of preserving jars. Curiosity got the better of her, and she carefully opened it to find neatly folded baby linens and tiny garments, clearly made with loving care for a child who had never arrived to wear them. Zara closed the trunk gently, understanding now why this room had remained untouched. Some pain was too great to face, some losses too profound to acknowledge. She left the trunk where she had found it but cleaned around it, respecting the memory it represented. A week into Hayes's absence, a fierce summer storm swept across the ranch. Rain pounded against the windows while lightning split the sky and thunder shook the house to its foundations. Zara lit lamps against the premature darkness and checked that all the windows were securely latched. Lewis and Miguel had gone to check on the horses in the barn, leaving Zara alone in the main house as the storm intensified. She was in the kitchen, heating water for tea, when a particularly violent thunderclap was followed by a splintering crash from upstairs. Heart racing, Zara grabbed a lamp and hurried up the stairs. The noise had come from the direction of Hayes's bedroom at the end of the hall. The door was partially open, and when Zara cautiously pushed it wider, she saw that a large branch had crashed through the window, allowing rain to pour into the room. Without hesitation, Zara set down her lamp and rushed to assess the damage. The branch had shattered half the window pane, and rain was soaking the bed and floor beneath. She quickly stripped the wet bedding and used it to soak up the water on the floor, then dragged the heavy branch back through the window, struggling with its weight. Using a piece of wood from the kindling box she had carried up, Zara managed to cover the broken window temporarily, stemming the worst of the rain's intrusion. Only when the immediate crisis was contained did Zara become aware that she was standing in Hayes's private space. The room was spartanly furnished but meticulously organized. A desk in the corner held neat stacks of papers and account books. The bedside table supported a single lamp and a well-worn Bible. On the bureau sat a silver-framed photograph of a young woman with dark hair and a serious expression Caroline, Zara presumed, Feeling like an intruder despite the emergency that had brought her there, Zara quickly gathered the wet bedding and retreated to the hallway. She would need to find dry linens and properly secure the window before Hayes returned. Louis and Miguel arrived back from the barn just as Zara descended the stairs with her arms full of soaked bedding. "What happened?" Louis asked, taking in her damp appearance and the bundle in her arms. Zara explained about the broken window, and Louis immediately went to inspect the damage. "You did well," he told her upon his return. "I will board it properly tomorrow when the storm passes. For tonight, your solution will hold." "The bedding is ruined," Zara fretted. "And I'm not sure where to find replacements." "There are extra linens in the storage room off the upstairs hallway," Louis assured her. "The patron will understand. These things happen." Still, Zara felt uneasy about having entered Hayes's room without permission. As she hung the wet bedding to dry in the kitchen and located fresh linens for his bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had glimpsed a part of his life he kept carefully guarded. The storm passed by morning, leaving behind mud and debris but no serious damage to the ranch buildings. Louis repaired the window properly while Zara and Miguel cleared fallen branches from the yard. Life resumed its rhythm, but Zara found her thoughts frequently turning to Hayes and the men on the cattle drive, wondering how they had weathered the storm on the open trail. It was nearly 3 weeks before the hands returned from the cattle drive, a few days later than expected due to difficulties crossing a swollen river after the storm. Zara heard them before she saw them, the distant sound of men's voices calling to each other, the jingle of spurs and bridles as they rode into the ranch yard. She stepped onto the porch to welcome them, shading her eyes against the late afternoon sun. The men looked trail-worn and weary, their clothes dusty and their faces sunburned beneath their hat brims. They dismounted stiffly, leading their horses toward the barn where Louis and Miguel waited to help with the animals. Hayes was the last to dismount, his movements betraying the exhaustion of 3 weeks in the saddle. When he saw Zara on the porch, however, his posture straightened, and something like relief flickered across his features. "Welcome back," Zara called. "Supper will be ready soon, beef stew and fresh bread." A cheer went up from the tired hands at this announcement. Hayes approached the porch while the others headed for the wash basins set up behind the bunkhouse. "Everything go all right here?" he asked, removing his hat to wipe his forehead with his bandana. "Yes, though we had a terrible storm about 2 weeks ago." Zara hesitated before adding, "A branch broke your bedroom window. Louis repaired it, but I'm afraid some of your bedding was damaged before we could stop the rain." Hayes waved away her concern. "Windows break, that's hardly your fault. Still, I had to enter your room to deal with it. I apologize for the intrusion." Hayes's expression softened. "You did what was necessary. I appreciate your care for the house." He glanced toward the bunkhouse where the hands were washing up. "The drive was successful, despite the delays. We got a good price for the herd." "I'm glad to hear it." Zara smiled, genuinely pleased for him. "You must be exhausted. I'll have hot water sent up for a proper bath before supper." Something changed in Hayes's face, then a vulnerability that appeared and vanished so quickly Zara almost thought she'd imagined it. "Thank you, Miss Elliott. That would be most welcome." Later, as Zara served supper to the returned men, the dining room filled with their accounts of the cattle drive, the difficulties crossing the swollen river, a near stampede during a lightning storm, the tough negotiations with the buyers in Holbrook. Hayes sat at the head of the table, quieter than his men but occasionally adding a detail or correcting an exaggeration. Zara noticed that he seemed more relaxed than she had ever seen him, as if the successful completion of the drive had lifted a weight from his shoulders. When his eyes met hers across the table, There was a warmth there that sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. After the meal, the hands retreated to the bunkhouse with extra portions of the apple pie Zara had baked in anticipation of their return. Hayes remained at the table, savoring a final cup of coffee. "Your cooking was sorely missed on the trail," he commented as Zara cleared the dishes. "The chuck wagon fare was substantial but lacking in refinement." Zara laughed softly. "I doubt refinement is what those men craved after a day of driving cattle, but thank you for the compliment." Hayes rose to help her carry plates to the kitchen, an unexpected gesture that made Zara pause in surprise. "You don't need to do that," she protested. "You must be tired." "I've been giving orders for 3 weeks straight," Hayes replied, continuing to stack dishes. "It feels good to do something simple with my hands." They worked together in comfortable silence, Hayes rinsing plates while Zara washed them. It struck her how domestic the scene was, the two of them side by side in the lamplight, engaged in this ordinary task. It was a kind of intimacy she hadn't anticipated when she agreed to come to Crossfire. "I noticed you've been working in the orchard," Hayes said as they finished the dishes. "Lewis tells me you've been pruning the trees." "Yes, they needed attention." Zara dried her hands on her apron. "I hope you don't mind. I know it was special to your wife." Hayes was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the window where night had fallen outside. "Caroline would have approved," he said finally. "She hated to see things neglected." "Lewis told me about her plans for the orchard," Zara said carefully, "making cider and preserves to sell. She had grand ideas for Crossfire." Hayes's voice held a mixture of pride and sorrow. "She wanted it to be more than just a cattle operation, something that would last, something unique." "It still could be," Zara ventured. "The trees are healthy underneath the overgrowth. With proper care, they could produce well next season." Hayes turned to look at her, his expression thoughtful. "You have a way of seeing possibilities where I've only seen reminders of loss." The honesty of his words hung in the air between them, creating a moment of connection that made Zara's heart beat faster. Before she could respond, however, Hayes straightened and moved toward the door. "Thank you for looking after things while I was gone, Miss Elliott. Good night." "Good night, Mr. Maddox," Zara replied, watching him go with the sense that something significant had shifted between them, though she couldn't quite define what it was. Summer progressed at Crossfire Ranch with a steady rhythm of work and small pleasures. Zara's garden produced abundantly, providing fresh vegetables that transformed the ranch's meals. The men commented frequently on how much better they were eating since her arrival, and even Hayes had put on a bit of weight, losing the gaunt look he had carried when Zara first met him. July brought scorching heat that made outdoor work challenging. The hands began their days before dawn and took shelter during the worst of the afternoon sun. Zara adjusted her routines accordingly, baking in the early morning hours before the kitchen became unbearably hot and preparing cold suppers that wouldn't require long hours at the stove. It was during one such sweltering afternoon that Hayes found Zara in the orchard, examining the developing apples on trees she had pruned earlier in the summer. "You shouldn't be out in this heat," he said by way of greeting, holding out a canteen of water. Zara accepted it gratefully, taking a long drink before responding. "I wanted to check how the trees are faring. The fruit is coming along nicely." Hayes looked up at the branches heavy with small green apples. "I haven't really looked at these trees in years," he admitted. "Caroline planted most of them our first spring here. They're good varieties, well chosen for this climate." Zara returned the canteen. "They just needed someone to care for them again." Hayes's eyes moved from the trees to Zara's face, studying her with an intensity that made her cheeks warm despite the fact that she had attributed it to the sun. "You've brought a lot back to life at Crossfire," he said quietly. Before Zara could respond, Hayes continued, "I came to tell you we're having visitors for supper. The Prescott family from Silver Creek is stopping by on their way back from Pinyon." "Oh." Zara immediately began mentally reviewing the pantry contents. "How many should I expect?" "David and Martha Prescott, plus their daughter Lillian. Their good neighbors helped us during a difficult calving season last winter." Hayes hesitated before adding, "They don't know about how you came to be at Crossfire." Zara understood his meaning immediately. "You haven't told them I was one in a card game," she said bluntly. Hayes winced slightly at her phrasing. "I thought it best to simply introduce you as our housekeeper, for your sake." Zara nodded, appreciating his discretion even as she felt a twinge of something like disappointment. Of course, Hayes wouldn't want his respectable neighbors to know the unusual circumstances of her employment. It was a reminder of the scandal attached to her situation, no matter how proper their actual arrangement had been. "I'll prepare something special for supper," she said, turning the conversation back to practicalities. "Perhaps fried chicken with the new potatoes from the garden." "That sounds perfect." Hayes seemed relieved by her acceptance of the situation. They should arrive around 5. The Prescotts proved to be pleasant company. David was a cattle rancher like Hayes, but on a smaller scale. Martha was a warm, motherly woman who immediately complimented Zara on the cleanliness of the house and the quality of the meal. Their daughter Lillian was about Zara's age, pretty and talkative, clearly delighted to have female company. "We so rarely see new faces in Silver Creek," Lillian said as they sat in the parlor after supper, the men discussing cattle prices while the women conversed separately. "How long have you been at Crossfire, Miss Elliott?" "Just over 2 months now," Zara replied. "And before that, were you in service elsewhere?" "I was a school teacher in Pinyon," Zara explained, sticking close to the truth. "When the term ended, I needed new employment." "A teacher?" Martha exclaimed. "How wonderful! Our school in Silver Creek is without a teacher for the fall term. The previous one married and moved to California." Lillian leaned forward eagerly. "Oh, Miss Elliott, would you consider applying? It would be so lovely to have someone young and educated in town." Zara felt a surge of interest at the prospect. Teaching had been her passion, and while she had found satisfaction in her work at Crossfire, she missed the intellectual engagement of the classroom. "I'm currently committed to my position here," she said carefully, aware that Hayes might overhear. "But surely Mr. Maddox could spare you," Lillian persisted. "Silver Creek isn't far. You could even stay here and ride in for school days." 10 miles is quite a journey to make daily," Zara pointed out with a smile. "You could board with us during the week," Martha offered. "We have a spare room that the previous teacher used." The conversation was interrupted when Hayes approached, having apparently caught the drift of their discussion. "Are you trying to steal my housekeeper, Mrs. Prescott?" he asked, his tone light though Zara detected tension beneath it. "We were just telling Miss Elliott about our vacant teaching position," Martha explained. "Given her experience, she would be perfect." Hayes's expression was unreadable as he looked at Zara. "Indeed, she would. Miss Elliott is exceptionally capable. Then you wouldn't object if she applied?" Lillian asked hopefully. "That would be Miss Elliott's decision entirely," Hayes replied, his eyes still on Zara. "She's free to pursue whatever opportunity suits her best." The conversation moved on to other topics, but Zara remained distracted, turning over the possibility in her mind. Teaching again would be wonderful. Yet the thought of leaving Crossfire, leaving Hayes and the hands, and the home she had begun to create here, filled her with an unexpected sadness. After the Prescotts departed, promising to send information about the teaching position, Zara busied herself with clearing away the coffee cups and dessert plates. Hayes appeared in the doorway of the dining room, watching her work in silence for a moment. "Would you prefer teaching to housekeeping?" he asked abruptly. Zara paused, considering her answer carefully. "Teaching was my first calling," she admitted. "I enjoyed the work very much. Then perhaps you should apply for the Silver Creek position." Hayes's voice was neutral, giving away nothing of his own thoughts on the matter. Zara turned to face him directly. "Are you eager to be rid of me, Mr. Maddox?" "Not at all," he replied quickly, then more measured. "But I wouldn't keep you from advancing yourself. Our arrangement was always meant to be temporary until you found your feet again." "Was it?" Zara asked softly. "I don't recall discussing an end date to my employment." Hayes ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty. "I assumed you would want to move on eventually. A young woman like yourself, educated and capable, surely housekeeping for a group of cowboys isn't your life's ambition." "I've been happy here," Zara said simply. Something flickered in Hayes's eyes, hope perhaps, or relief. "Have you?" "Yes." Zara gathered her courage to continue. "I've found purpose here and friendship." Hayes took a step closer. "Is that what we are, Miss Elliott, friends?" The question seemed to carry layers of meaning that made Zara's heart race. "I would like to think so, Mr. Maddox." "Hayes," he said quietly. "After all this time, I think you might call me Hayes." "Zara," she offered in return, the simple exchange of first names feeling strangely intimate. They stood looking at each other for a long moment, the air between them charged with unspoken possibilities. Then Hayes cleared his throat and stepped back slightly. "I won't stand in your way if teaching is what you want," he said. "But know that there will always be a place for you at Crossfire." With that, he bid her good night and left Zara standing amid the remnants of their dinner party, wondering what had just transpired between them and what it might mean for her future. The following week brought a letter from Martha Prescott with details about the teaching position in Silver Creek. The school term would begin in September, and the town council was eager to interview candidates as soon as possible. Martha reiterated her offer of boarding arrangements and enclosed a formal application for Zara to complete if she was interested. Zara read the letter several times, weighing her options carefully. The teaching position offered a return to work she loved and the independence of earning her own salary rather than being dependent on Hayes's employment. Yet Crossfire had become home in ways she hadn't anticipated when she first arrived. She had grown fond of the ranch hands, with their rough manners and kind hearts. She had transformed the neglected house into a comfortable home and revived Caroline's garden and orchard. And then there was Hayes himself, the enigmatic man who had saved her from her brother's gambling debts and given her sanctuary when she needed it most. In the weeks since the cattle drive, something had shifted in their relationship. Hayes sought her company more frequently, lingering after meals to discuss books from the library or ranch business. He had taken to joining her in the orchard occasionally, helping her pick the ripening summer apples and listening as she explained her plans for preserving them. These quiet moments together had revealed a different side of Hayes, thoughtful, occasionally humorous, and deeply knowledgeable about the land and animals under his care. Zara found herself looking forward to their conversations, feeling a flutter of anticipation whenever he appeared in the doorway of the kitchen or found her working in the garden. She knew she was developing feelings for him that went beyond gratitude or friendship, but Hayes remained difficult to read. His moments of warmth and openness were often followed by periods of reserve, as if he caught himself getting too close and deliberately stepped back. Zara was pondering these matters as she worked in the kitchen one afternoon, preparing apple preserves from the first harvest of the orchard. The sweet scent of cooking fruit filled the room as she carefully stirred the bubbling mixture. Something smells wonderful, Hayes commented from the doorway. Zara looked up with a smile. Apple preserves. The first batch from Caroline's trees. Hayes approached the stove, peering into the copper pot. She would have been pleased, he said softly. She always said those trees would bear fruit worth waiting for. She was right. Zara offered him a spoonful to taste. What do you think? Hayes blew gently on the steaming preserves before tasting them. Perfect, he pronounced, sweet but not cloying. Zara returned to stirring, aware of Hayes's presence beside her. I received information about the teaching position in Silver Creek, she said after a moment. And? Hayes's voice was carefully neutral. I'm considering it, Zara admitted. Teaching was always my passion. Hayes nodded, his expression giving nothing away. When would you need to leave? The term begins in September. I would need to move to Silver Creek by the end of August. Zara watched his face closely. If I decide to accept, of course. Hayes seemed about to say more, but instead moved toward the window, looking out at the ranch yard where the hands were breaking a new horse. Have you made your decision yet? No, Zara said honestly. There are considerations that make it difficult. Hayes turned back to face her. What considerations? Zara hesitated, uncertain how to express the attachment she felt to Crossfire and to him without revealing too much of her heart. I've made a home here, she said finally. I would miss it, and the people. Something changed in Hayes's expression, a softening around his eyes. The people would miss you too, he said quietly, particularly one person. Zara's heart stuttered at his words. Hayes, I have no right to ask you to stay, he continued quickly. You came here under unusual circumstances, not of your own choosing. You've more than repaid any debt you might have felt you owed me. I've never seen it as repaying a debt, Zara protested. Nevertheless, your future should be determined by your own desires, not obligation. Hayes moved toward the door. Think carefully about what you want, Zara. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving Zara to wonder if she had imagined the undercurrent of emotion in his words. Did he want her to stay? And if so, was it merely because she was a good housekeeper? Or was there something more between them? The apple preserves nearly boiled over, recalling Zara to her task. As she carefully filled jars with the golden mixture, she realized that her decision about the teaching position would ultimately depend on clarifying what future, if any, she might have with Hayes Maddox. August arrived with relentless heat that baked the Arizona landscape to a golden brown. The creek that gave Crossfire Ranch its name dwindled to a trickle, prompting Hayes and the hands to drive the cattle to higher pastures where water was more plentiful. Zara had still not given Martha Prescott an answer about the teaching position, though the deadline for her decision was rapidly approaching. She found herself torn between the familiar satisfaction of teaching and the unexpected happiness she had found at Crossfire. Her indecision came to a head when Lewis delivered a letter from Thomas, forwarded from the postmaster in Pinyon, who knew of Zara's whereabouts. She opened it with trembling hands, uncertain what her brother could possibly have to say after months of silence. The letter was brief but stunning in its contents. Thomas claimed to have reformed in Tucson, having found steady work as a clerk in a mercantile. He expressed remorse for his treatment of Zara and requested that she join him in Tucson, where he had secured a teaching position for her at a respectable girls' school. Zara read the letter 3 times, emotions warring within her. Part of her wanted to believe that Thomas had truly changed, that he had finally become the responsible brother she had always hoped he could be. Another part remembered all the broken promises, the repeated pattern of apparent reformation followed by inevitable relapse into gambling and drinking. She was still sitting with the letter when Hayes returned from the pastures earlier than expected, coming into the kitchen in search of water. He stopped short when he saw her troubled expression. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately, wordlessly. Zara handed him the letter. Hayes read it quickly, his expression darkening with each line. When he finished, he looked up at her, concern evident in his eyes. "You're considering this?" he asked, an edge to his voice. "I don't know," Zara admitted. "He is my brother, my only family, if he's truly changed." Hayes set the letter down carefully. "People like Thomas rarely change fundamentally, Zara. They may go through periods of improvement, but eventually they return to old habits." "You don't know that," Zara said, though without much conviction. He seemed sincere." "He seemed sincere every time he promised to stop gambling, too, I imagine." Hayes's tone was gentle despite his harsh words, "including the night he wagered you in a card game." Zara flinched at the reminder. "That's not fair." "Perhaps not," Hayes conceded. "But I've seen men like your brother before. The pattern is always the same: contrition followed by promises, followed by betrayal when the next temptation arises. So I should just abandon him, my only blood relative." Hayes ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I'm not saying that. I'm saying you should protect yourself. If you want to help Thomas, do it from a position of strength and independence, not by making yourself dependent on him again." "The teaching position would give me that," Zara said thoughtfully. "I could be near enough to Tucson to visit Thomas occasionally, but still have my own life in Silver Creek." Something flickered in Hayes's eyes, disappointment, perhaps, or resignation. "Is that what you've decided, then? To take the Silver Creek position?" Zara met his gaze directly. "I haven't decided anything yet." "What's holding you back?" Hayes asked, his voice softening. "If teaching is what you want, what keeps you from accepting the position?" It was the moment of truth, Zara realized. If she didn't speak now, she might never find the courage again. "You," she said simply. "You're what's holding me back." Hayes went very still. "Me?" "Yes." Zara rose from her chair, gathering her courage. "I've developed feelings for you, Hayes. Feelings that go beyond gratitude or friendship. I stay because when I imagine leaving Crossfire, leaving you, I can't bear the thought." Hayes's expression was unreadable for a long moment. Then he took a step toward her, his voice low and intense. "You can't know what you're saying. You came here as a result of your brother's recklessness." "I purchased your freedom, but I never intended." "You didn't purchase me," Zara interrupted firmly. "You offered me a choice when Thomas had taken all other choices away, and every day since then you've treated me with respect and kindness." "You deserve more than a widower still haunted by his past," Hayes said, though he took another step closer. "You deserve someone whole." "No one is truly whole," Zara said softly. "We all carry our pasts with us. The question is whether we let those pasts determine our futures." They stood facing each other in the kitchen, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows through the windows. Hayes reached out slowly, as if afraid she might disappear, and touched her cheek with gentle fingers. "I've been afraid to acknowledge what I feel for you," he admitted. "After Caroline died, I swore I would never risk that kind of loss again." "I understand fear," Zara said, leaning slightly into his touch. "I've been afraid, too afraid that what I felt was one-sided, afraid that you still saw me as an obligation or a reminder of a distasteful transaction." "No," Hayes said firmly. "Never that. You've brought life back to this ranch, Zara, back to me." His hand cupped her cheek fully now. "I've been falling in love with you for months, trying to deny it, trying to tell myself it was wrong to feel this way." "Why wrong?" Zara asked, her heart soaring at his confession. "Because of how you came here. Because I thought any feelings you might have for me would be tainted by the circumstances of our meeting." Hayes's thumb traced her cheekbone. I wanted you to be truly free to choose your own path, even if that path led away from Crossfire, away from me. I am free, Zara insisted, and I choose you, Hayes, if you'll have me. The last of Hayes's restraint seemed to crumble at her words. He pulled her gently into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened as Zara responded with equal fervor. Her arms wound around his neck as his hands spread across her back, drawing her closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Hayes rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he whispered. "Not as my housekeeper, but as my partner, my wife, if you'll consent to marry me." "Yes," Zara answered without hesitation. "Yes to all of it." Hayes kissed her again, more gently this time, a seal to their promise. When they parted, he kept her close in the circle of his arms. "What about Thomas?" he asked. "And the teaching position?" "I'll write to Thomas," Zara decided. "I'll tell him I'm building a new life here, but that I'm willing to maintain correspondence if he's truly committed to changing his ways. As for teaching," she smiled up at Hayes. "Perhaps Crossfire could use a school of its own someday. There are ranch families in the area with children who have to travel too far for education." Hayes's eyes lit with appreciation for her vision. "Caroline always said Crossfire should be more than just cattle, a community center, a place where families could thrive." He brushed a strand of hair from Zara's face. "She would have liked you very much, I think." "I hope so," Zara said sincerely. "I promise to honor her memory while we build our future together." "Our future," Hayes repeated as if savoring the words. "I never thought I'd have one of those again." The sound of boots on the porch alerted them to the approaching ranch hands, returning from their day's work. Hayes reluctantly released Zara, though he kept hold of her hand. "We should tell them," he said. "They'll be pleased. They've been dropping hints for weeks that I should stop being so stubborn and court you properly." Zara laughed, happiness bubbling up inside her. "And here I thought we were being so discreet with our feelings." "Apparently not discreet enough for men who spend their days reading the subtle signs of weather and livestock," Hayes said with a rueful smile. He squeezed her hand. "Are you certain, Zara, about staying, about becoming a rancher's wife? It's not an easy life." "I'm certain about you," Zara replied simply. "The rest we'll figure out together." The door opened, and Lewis entered, followed by the other hands. They stopped short at the sight of Hayes and Zara standing close together, their joined hands telling a story without words. Lewis was the first to recover, a slow smile spreading across his weathered face. "It's about time," he said, looking from Hayes to Zara. "The patron has been like a bear with a thorn in his paw these past weeks, afraid you would leave us." "She's staying," Hayes announced, his voice carrying a note of wonder. "She's agreed to become my wife." A cheer went up from the hands, their genuine delight warming Zara's heart. These men who had become her friends now welcomed her as family, and the knowledge deepened her certainty that she had made the right choice. Later that evening, after a celebratory supper during which the hands had toasted the engagement with more enthusiasm than decorum, Hayes and Zara walked together in the orchard as the day's heat gave way to the cooler night air. "I never thanked you properly," Zara said as they stood beneath the apple trees she had nurtured back to productivity. "For what?" Hayes asked, his arm around her waist. "For winning that card game," she replied with a small smile. "As strange as it sounds, it was the best thing that could have happened to me." Hayes shook his head, his expression serious. "I didn't win you, Zara. I never owned you, never wanted to." "I know that now," she assured him. "But that night, you gave me a chance at a new life when all seemed lost. You saw value in me when Thomas saw only a commodity to be traded." "I saw you," Hayes said simply. A woman of courage and dignity, trapped in an impossible situation. I just wanted to offer you a way out. You offered me much more than that. Zara turned in his arms to face him. You offered me a home, a purpose, and now a future I never imagined possible. Hayes bent to kiss her, a gentle affirmation of all they had found together. I love you, Zara Elliott, he murmured against her lips, soon to be Zara Maddox. I love you too, she replied, the words feeling right and true in her heart. And I can't wait to begin our life together. As twilight deepened around them, Hayes and Zara remained in the orchard, planning their future beneath trees that had once symbolized lost dreams, but now represented new beginnings. From the unlikely soil of a desperate gambling debt had grown a love neither had expected to find, a love strong enough to heal past wounds and brave enough to reach for tomorrow's promise. The wedding took place on a perfect September morning, just as the first hints of autumn began to soften the Arizona heat. Zara and Hayes exchanged vows beneath an arch decorated with late summer wildflowers and branches from the apple orchard, their fragrant white blossoms a symbol of renewal. The ceremony was small but joyful, attended by the ranch hands, neighboring families including the Prescotts, and even Mrs. Alvarez, who had insisted on baking the wedding cake despite her advancing years. Sheriff Miller from Pinyon had ridden out to perform the ceremony, bringing with him news that Thomas had indeed remained employed in Tucson, though he had declined Zara's invitation to attend the wedding. You look beautiful, Martha Prescott told Zara as she helped her arrange the simple veil over her dark hair. Zara wore a dress of ivory silk that Martha and Lillian had helped her sew, adorned with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. I can hardly believe this day has come, Zara admitted, smoothing the fabric of her skirt nervously. 6 months ago, I thought my life was over. Now it feels like it's just beginning. That's the Lord's way, Martha said with a warm smile. He often brings blessings from the most unlikely circumstances. When Zara walked toward Hayes, who waited beneath the flower arch with an expression of awe on his face, she felt a sense of rightness that transcended all the uncertainty and fear that had marked her journey to this moment. This man, this place, they had become her home in ways she had never anticipated when she first arrived at Crossfire. You are more beautiful than I deserve, Hayes whispered as she reached his side. We deserve each other, Zara corrected gently, taking his hands in hers. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promising partnership and devotion through all the challenges that ranch life might bring. When Sheriff Miller pronounced them husband and wife, Hayes kissed Zara with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes and cheers from the assembled guests. The celebration continued throughout the day, with a feast prepared by Mrs. Alvarez and the neighboring ranch wives, music provided by Charlie on his fiddle, and dancing that lasted well into the evening. Hayes, normally reserved, surprised everyone by sweeping Zara into a lively reel, his face alight with a joy that few had seen since Caroline's death. The patron is himself again, Lewis observed to Mrs. Alvarez as they watched the newlyweds dance. Miss Zara has brought him back to life. They have brought each other back to life, Mrs. Alvarez corrected, her wise old eyes following the couple's movements. That is the best kind of marriage. Later, as twilight deepened into night and the guests began to depart, Hayes led Zara away from the festivities toward the main house, their home now in truth as well as function. The hands, with surprising tact, had arranged to spend the night at the neighboring ranch, giving the newlyweds privacy for their first evening as husband and wife. Are you happy, Mrs. Maddox? Hayes asked as they walked hand in hand across the yard. Completely, Zara assured him, still marveling at her new name. Though I think it will take some time to get used to being called that. We have all the time in the world, Hayes promised, drawing her close for a kiss that hinted at the intimacy to come. Our life together is just beginning. In the months that followed, Zara and Hayes settled into a partnership that transformed Crossfire Ranch. Zara's natural organizational skills complemented Hayes's practical knowledge of cattle and land management. Together, they expanded the apple orchard and established a small school for the children of neighboring ranches, with Zara teaching 3 days a week in a converted storage building near the main house. The apple preserves from Caroline's orchard became locally famous, selling well in Silver Creek and even being shipped to markets in Tucson. Zara found satisfaction in bringing Caroline's vision to fruition, feeling a connection to the woman whose legacy lived on at Crossfire. Hayes, for his part, blossomed under Zara's love. The shadows that had haunted him gradually receded, replaced by a quiet confidence and occasional flashes of the humor that had been dormant since his first wife's death. He kept Caroline's photograph in their home, but now it stood alongside new images Hayes and Zara on their wedding day. The ranch hands gathered around the supper table, the first class of students in front of the Crossfire School. Thomas wrote occasionally from Tucson, his letters showing signs of the stability he had claimed to have found. In the spring following the wedding, he visited Crossfire briefly, awkward but genuinely apologetic for his past actions. Hayes was coolly polite, willing to extend a second chance for Zara's sake while making it clear that Thomas would need to prove himself worthy of his sister's trust. "He seems different," Zara observed after Thomas departed, having stayed only 2 days. "More settled." "People can change," Hayes acknowledged, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the dust from Thomas's departing horse fade on the horizon. "When they have the right motivation." "What was your motivation?" Zara asked, looking up at her husband. "For changing from the solitary rancher I met that night in the saloon to the man you are now," Hayes smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You. From the moment I saw you standing in that corner, too proud to show fear even when your brother had wagered away your freedom, I knew you were someone extraordinary. Yet you waited months to tell me how you felt," Zara teased gently. "I needed to be sure you were choosing me freely, not out of gratitude or lack of options." Hayes's expression grew serious. "I needed to be sure I was worthy of you." "You were always worthy," Zara assured him, rising on tiptoe to kiss him properly. "Even when you didn't believe it yourself." As summer approached again, bringing with it the anniversary of Zara's arrival at Crossfire, she shared news that completed their happiness. She was expecting a child in the late fall. Hayes received the announcement with a mixture of joy and trepidation, the memory of Caroline's death in childbirth still a shadow in his mind. "History won't repeat itself," Zara promised him, understanding his fears without him having to voice them. "I'm strong, and we'll have the doctor from Silver Creek attend the birth." "I can't lose you," Hayes admitted, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. "You and this child are everything to me now." "You won't lose us," Zara said with a confidence she was determined to maintain. "This baby is a new beginning, Hayes, a continuation of all we've built together." As Zara's pregnancy progressed, the entire ranch seemed to hover protectively around her. Lewis insisted on taking over the heavier household tasks, while the younger hands competed to fetch and carry for the Senora. Hayes himself became almost comically vigilant, monitoring Zara's activities and rest with such dedication that she eventually had to gently remind him that women had been having babies since the beginning of time. "Not my wife, not my child," Hayes replied stubbornly. "You'll humor me in this, Zara." And so she did, recognizing that his concern came from a place of deep love rather than doubt in her strength. She continued teaching at the small school until her condition made it impractical, then focused on preparing the nursery in what had once been a guest bedroom adjacent to their own. One evening, as Hayes helped her arrange baby clothes in the nursery, Zara noticed him examining a small wooden rocking horse with a thoughtful expression. "Louis made it," he explained when she asked. "For our child." "It's beautiful," Zara said, running her hand over the smoothly polished wood. "I had one like it as a boy in Texas," Hayes said, his voice distant with memory. "My father carved it for me." "You rarely speak of your family," Zara observed gently. Hayes set the rocking horse carefully on a shelf. "They died in a fever epidemic when I was 16. That's why I left Texas. Too many memories." Zara placed her hand over his. "Our child will know all the stories of your family, of mine, of Caroline, all the threads that have woven together to create this life we share." Hayes turned his hand to clasp hers. "You have a gift for seeing beauty in difficult histories," he said. "It's one of the many reasons I love you." November brought their son into the world after a difficult but ultimately successful labor. Hayes paced outside their bedroom while Dr. Matthews from Silver Creek attended Zara, his face gray with worry until the first cry of the infant announced its safe arrival. "You have a healthy boy, Mr. Maddox," Dr. Matthews announced, opening the door to admit the anxious father. "And your wife has come through admirably." Hayes approached the bed where Zara lay, exhausted but radiant, their son cradled in her arms. "He's perfect," she whispered as Hayes sank to his knees beside them, overwhelmed by relief and joy. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion as he gently touched the baby's tiny hand. "Thank you for our son." They named him William Hayes Maddox in honor of Zara's father, but called him Will from the beginning. He had Hayes's dark hair and Zara's clear blue eyes, a combination that charmed everyone at Crossfire from Louis to the newest ranch hand. As Christmas approached, bringing with it Will's first month of life, Zara reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. From the desperate night in Pinyon, when her brother had wagered her in a card game, to this peaceful evening in the home she shared with the man who had won that game but never tried to claim ownership of her. Hayes found her in the nursery, rocking Will beside a window frosted with the rare Arizona winter chill. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, coming to stand behind her chair, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "How strangely life unfolds," Zara replied, looking up at him with a smile. "How the worst moment of my life led me to the best ones." Hayes bent to kiss her, then touched his son's soft cheek with reverent fingers. "I think about that too," he admitted. "How close I came to not entering that saloon that night, how many small decisions led us both to that moment." "Do you believe in fate?" Zara asked. Hayes considered the question seriously. "I believe in making the most of the chances we're given," he said finally, "in recognizing a blessing even when it comes disguised as misfortune." Will stirred in Zara's arms, his tiny face scrunching briefly before relaxing back into sleep. "He is our greatest blessing," she murmured. "One of many," Hayes agreed, his gaze encompassing Zara, their son, and the home they had built together. "But you, Zara Maddox, will always be the first and greatest blessing of my life." Zara rose carefully, placing the sleeping Will in his cradle before turning to embrace her husband. "And you are mine," she whispered against his chest. "From an unlikely beginning came the greatest love I could have imagined." Hayes held her close, his heartbeat steady beneath her cheek. "Not the end of our story," he promised. "Just the beginning of its best chapters." Outside, a gentle snow began to fall, rare and precious in the Arizona territory. just like the love that had blossomed at Crossfire Ranch from the most unexpected of seeds. A desperate gamble, a fateful card game, and two hearts brave enough to risk everything on a new beginning. As the years passed, Crossfire Ranch flourished under the combined care of Hayes and Zara Maddox. Will grew into a strong, thoughtful boy with his father's quiet confidence and his mother's quick intelligence. When he was 3, a sister joined the family, Caroline Rose Maddox, named for the woman whose legacy lived on in the thriving apple orchard that had become one of Crossfire's signature features. The small school that Zara had started expanded as more families settled in the area, eventually moving to a proper schoolhouse built on the edge of Crossfire property, with Zara continuing to teach alongside another teacher hired from back east. Hayes managed the growing cattle operation with Lewis's steadfast support, while also developing the commercial side of the apple business that Zara had nurtured from Caroline's original vision. Thomas Elliott remained in Tucson, where he eventually married a widow with 2 young children, seemingly finding the stability that had eluded him in his younger years. His relationship with Zara slowly healed, though Hayes maintained a cautious distance, never quite forgetting the desperate gamble that had brought Zara into his life, but could just as easily have delivered her into less honorable hands. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Hayes presented Zara with a deed he had purchased the old Elliott Ranch in Pinon, the property her father had built and Thomas had gambled away. "I thought perhaps Will might want it someday," Hayes explained as Zara examined the document with tears in her eyes. "A piece of your family's history reclaimed. You continue to surprise me, Hayes Maddox," Zara said, embracing her husband with fierce gratitude. "After all these years." "I intend to keep surprising you for at least 50 more, Hayes promised, his hair now liberally streaked with silver but his green eyes as warm and compelling as the day Zara had first met them across a smoke-filled saloon. That night, as they sat on the porch watching Will and Caroline play in the yard with the ranch dogs, Zara reflected on the extraordinary journey from that fateful card game to this moment of contentment. "You ever regret it?" she asked Hayes, "taking such a risk that night in Pinon?" Hayes looked at her with the same steady gaze that had first given her hope in her darkest hour. "The only risk," he said, taking her hand in his, "would have been letting you go." And as the Arizona sunset painted the sky in brilliant gold and crimson, Zara Maddox knew that some gambles, against all odds, delivered rewards beyond imagining, and that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings led to the most beautiful destinies of all.